AskReddit by deleted. What's the creepiest thing you've ever witnessed? My house is on the side of a highway and I have windows facing the highway. It was late at night. I couldn't sleep, so I decided to tire myself out by jump roping. Halfway through my session, I took a glance outside and I saw a man standing on the closest side of the highway staring at me under the lamppost. It felt as if it was something out of a horror movie. Once I saw his creepy silhouette, I immediately just ducked to the ground, and when I looked up he was gone. To me now it's a funny situation, as he probably was just some homeless man confused as to why someone was jump roping at like 12 AM, and when I fell down he probably bolted lol. Scrolling in here to find saw a weirdo jump roping in the dark in their house at midnight when I was on my way home drunk from the bar. Driving on the interstate late at night. Road was decently foggy, so visibility was somewhat reduced. In this distance there was a light waving back and forth through the fog in the middle of the road, slowly getting more pronounced as I got closer. I got close enough to then see that it was a guy waving his phone flashlight to alert oncoming traffic. Right in the area past him was two cars that had just crashed, and bodies all over the road. No first responders there yet or anything. Just carnage and a man flashing a light. What a good, brave man. Most people wouldn't or couldn't do that. Something that happened to me. When I was around 9ish, I answered a landline phone in our house. The man knew me by name. Said he knew my mom. Tried to chat with me. I didn't know him, and didn't like talking to adults. So I said let me get my mom, and ran to get her. She answered the phone and the man had hung up. A few weeks later, a girl in the grade ahead of me went missing. She'd apparently told her friends that a man contacted her, said he was a friend of her mom's and was going to pick her up after school to pick a present out for her mom as surprise. She was kidnapped and murdered. They found her body months later, but never caught the man. This was in early 90s. Turns out quite a few young girls had gotten the same phone call I had. He seems to have been choosing his victim. The FBI came to my house to ask me questions about that phone call. It still haunts me 30 years later. Still hoping they catch the guy. Absolutely heartbreaking. 1989. Amy Miholjevic, right? I was about the same age and lived in nearby Cleveland at the time. When I was a kid in Nick, me and my mom used to take the train or bus whenever we traveled. You can imagine the weird shit I've encountered during my childhood, but one event really sticks out to me. This homeless woman who appeared to be on the influence of some sort of hard drug stepped onto the train I was on. She started yelling about random shit, as crackheads would be known to do from time to time, so it was nothing too worrying. But then she stopped and started laughing directly at me. Then, while maintaining eye contact, she urinated over herself and said something along the lines of "those dreams are never gonna stop." I had been suffering from a recurring nightmare for years to that point and would wake up crying, sometimes without me even realizing it. It scared the living shit out of me. It was probably a lucky guess, but man did that shit stick with me. The nightmares did stop eventually though, so she can go fuck herself lol. Clairvoyant crackheads give me the creeps. When I was younger, 11 maybe 12, I moved into a new house. My room had a big closet and access to the attic. I was a scared little kid and was worried a monster lived up there. One night I woke up in the middle of the night to see my closet door slowly opening. I didn't move and then yelled for my parents. Found out if the door isn't properly closed, it will open itself. Still have never been as scared as I was as in the moment. New houses can really freak you out when you're not used to all the quirks and sounds. It took me a couple nights in my new house to get used to the sound of my cats jumping off the bed while I was trying to fall asleep. I've never lived in a 2-story house before, and when they land on the wood floors upstairs it's a more like hollow sound I guess than when they land on the downstairs floor. It sounded just like a heavy footstep, and I live alone so no one else should be walking around. I might have been a little more anxious than usual BC I hadn't set up an alarm yet lol. I was the sole witness to a murder. I've told this story before. I was in a Jeep with the top down. waiting for two guys on the sidewalk to stop arguing. One guy pulls a shank out of his sock and stuffs it, stiff-armed, into the other guy's eye. The crunch was sickening. He took off. I ran up. Blood was spurting out of the dude's face onto the sidewalk in spurts. Long story short, dead by the time the ambulance showed up. I was going to testify in court, but the other dude pleaded guilty and got 20-ish years, I believe. It was a long time ago. Not long enough for me to forget that sound though. I witnessed someone get shot and killed. It changes you. This is a bit of a different take on creepy. When I was about 12, I accidentally went off piste on a ski run and got a bit lost. I found myself on a flat expanse. I skied in the direction of massive board that I assumed was a sign, offering directions, but the lettering was on the other side. When I got around to face it, it was a danger sign warning people not to go near the lake due to thin ice. This is Australia, it's not cold enough to produce reliable ice. I realized I could have simply disappeared and perhaps no one would ever have found out what happened to me. I was skiing in an area where the cliffs are protected with net fences to keep skiers from slipping off. I took a sharp turn too fast and felt that I will smash into it. To reduce speed, I leaned in and broke as hard as I could. This made me lean so low in the turn that I slipped under the fence. My heart just stopped and I waited for the stomach lifting drop, but it never came. I just kept on sliding. Apparently they also put the fence up at a flat area. I was sure I was gone. My wife and I saw a guy jump off of a parking garage. We didn't know he was up there until he hit the ground about 30 feet in front of us. It was horrible. Being a kid witnessing my dad going through alcohol withdrawals. He would hold long conversations by himself as if he was talking to someone on the phone, and he would see things that weren't there. He then took my bike for a ride and fell over and had a seizure. I was too scared to do anything, but someone came to help and he went to the hospital for a week. I remember seeing my mom watching a hockey game on the wall next to her bed one night. Was too young to realize what was going on at the time. Had a couple of seizures the next day. Pretty fucked up what alcohol withdrawal will do. Went to bed in a hotel room with the balcony door open because it was hot. Had a bad dream of a guy in a red checked shirt peering into the room, entering, and eating an ice cream at the end of the bed. When I woke up, I discovered a half melted banana colored ice cream between the bed and the wall. Oh hell no. Not a spooky ghost story, but the creepiest thing I've ever seen was working my college job. I look a lot younger than my age in general. A 50-year-old man was intently set on talking to me and getting up real close to me while he did so. That alone made me incredibly uncomfortable. Then he asked, by the way, how old are you? When I said 24, he looked at me with an absolutely disgusted look on his face and said, oh, I thought you were way younger than that. To this day I am creeped out by that single comment. Eek. When I was around that age, a random guy at the bus station asked for my number and if I wanted to hang out with him. I said no and he said we can just be friends. How old are you? And I'm like 25. And he was like, what? I thought you were like 15 WTF. So I ask, why is he trying to hit on someone he thinks is 15 and isn't? So as well, you said you're 25 so it's fine. Was staying at my sister's when I was 14. And had a horrible nightmare about being strangled by the devil. I could only see his face smiling at me and feel a crushing sensation on my throat. I told him to fuck off and swung a punch, and I then woke up. I looked over and it was about 1 AM the next morning. My sister was complaining that she had a really horrible nightmare, that the devil was strangling her. I asked her what time this happened, and she said, around 1 o'clock. We were having our house renovated, room by room. When it was my bedroom's turn, I spent a few weeks or so sleeping in the attic. Every night up there I had sleep paralysis and kept seeing a shadowy male figure standing in one corner. I didn't bother saying anything about it. When my sister's room got renovated, she went to sleep in the attic. After a few days she complained to me that she'd been having sleep paralysis there and kept seeing a shadowy male figure standing in one corner. Our neighbors had a little disagreement. He evidently hit her a few too many times and she decided to knife him in the chest while he slept. She dragged his body to the closet. Then she walked to the kitchen and turned the burner on high while accidentally knocking over some paper towels or something. Then, she remembers that she is out of cigarettes and takes a stroll to the store. The heat from the blaze nearly melted our vinyl siding. Later, we watched crime scene techs use a shovel to pry him from the floor of what used to be the closet. Imagine burnt chicken skin stuck to a frying pan and having to get under it with your spatula. It was a lot for one evening. I feel like that isn't so much creepy as much as utterly fucking terrifying. Once saw a boar running up the shaft of a spear that went through its head. A blow that would be fatal to any living thing that you just look at and think, oh, it's dead. Brain got a mashed potatoes, but it just kept charging and creeping up the shaft of the spear like it was possessed and wanted to kill the man holding it regardless of life and death. It's very unsettling to see. Apparently that's why boar spears often have those protruding lugs on the base of the spearhead. A wounded boar will literally impale itself for a chance to gut you. It's not something that I witnessed, but something that happened to me. I have schizophrenia and I delusionally believed that I was pregnant, had morning nausea, no vomiting, abdominal distension, and several other symptoms of pregnancy. I felt the baby kicking. It happened multiple times and a gynecologist said that nothing was wrong with me physically. My mum isn't diagnosed with schizophrenia but had pretty much the same experience. One night, when staying at my parents' house, our daughter started crying because she needed a diaper change. My wife and I both went to her. At this time our daughter is old enough to walk but not old enough to talk. After the diaper change our daughter wiggled her way down to the ground and proceeded to walk toward the hallway. She didn't stumble her way there but walked intentionally. At first we thought the light in the hallway got her attention and so we let our daughter walk to the hallway. Reaching it, our daughter turns, looks down the hallway and starts waving to someone. But it was the middle of the night and the hallway was empty. Creepiest effkin' thing I ever saw. When I was a baby I'd do this too, then my parents found out my eyesight was bad. I took my nephew to this park semi-surrounded by woods. While pushing him on the swings I heard rustling and turned around to see a man in a ski mask watching us. 10/10 will never go back. Maybe he was just cold and waiting for his turn on the swing. I once worked as a server in a strip club. One member would pay me $20 plus to make an origami frog then step on it. I thought at first it was just weird but then I learned about the crush fetish. I knew a guy who rolled himself up in a rug and stayed in the entryway of a club so people would walk on him. That was his kink. The club was cool with it and all the regulars knew what the deal was. I'm not creeped out by it, but your comment made me remember him. Deleted. I've seen this happen and know others who have seen it as well. It's believed to be some sort of defensive tactic of theirs. Chances are it was scared. At a large playground, a commotion occurred on the other end. Apparently a strange man had attempted to walk off with a little 5/6-year-old girl. Her mother had caught on, raised the alarm, and several fathers at the playground had tackled and pinned him. The cops came and arrested the man and took interviews with everyone. Terrifying, when you consider what this man's likely plans for that innocent child were. Hopefully he's having a terrible time in prison. When I was a kid, maybe about 7, my parents went on a quick store run and left me at home alone. Normal in my small country town back then. I was a little rock hound and had a collection that I often enjoyed playing with. As I sat behind our living room couch, our black cat was passing by me and as it got to the end of the couch where it could see into the living room area, the cat's hair all stood straight up and it started hissing aggressively as if it was either super angry or scared. So naturally I leaned over to look around the couch and I see large footprints pressing into the carpet walking through the living room, down the hall, and into my parents' room. I froze and stayed that way until my parents got home and of course I told them instantly. They assured me everything was okay blah blah blah. Maybe 10 years later I learned that 2 weeks prior to me seeing this, my stepdad had I've spent all of October so far reading spooky stories, watching paranormal shows, listening to podcasts, all in the name of being spooked, and your story is the first that has genuinely shit me up. Utterly horrible. In the intended way though. I was a kid and it was Christmas Day and there was a knock on our front door. Expecting it to be family, my dad and I opened the door together and there was an old man standing there who was asking for directions to the train station. Our house was smack bang in the middle of suburbia, so he must have been walking in the wrong direction for hours. My dad gave him the directions and offered to drive him, but he declined and thanked us. As he was leaving, he looked down at me and said something really strange. "Never go to that place, that scares you." This man was really old and walked at a shuffling pace. Shrugging off his comment as well-intentioned senility, I went back to the living room. As he was walking down our path, it started to rain. My dad went to get an umbrella from under the stairs to give to him, and when he went back outside, the man was gone. My dad ran down the path and up and down the street trying to find him, but he was nowhere to be seen. The place I was scared of was this shack in the woods I used to walk past on my way to and from school. Always gave me a bad feeling. A few years later, someone was arrested for murdering a child there. Well-intentioned senility is my new band name. I had a baby monitor that would turn on whenever the baby made enough noise or moved enough to activate it. When it turned on, there would be this little click just a moment before the video feed turned on. Baby cried a lot, so the monitor was always at hand. She cries, I go up and put the binky in her mouth and hold it in place for a few minutes until she settles back down. One night I'm home alone and the thing clicks, I grab it and the video turns on a half second later and I see my baby in her crib with a hand reaching out holding the binky up to her mouth. And then the hand disappears. I freak out and run upstairs and there's nothing there. Baby is a bit fussy. I settle her down, and as I settle her down I realize that it had been my arm I saw. You see, when the stupid thing activates, the first frame of the video is the last frame from the last time the thing was turned on. Normally it wouldn't turn off while we were there with her because our motion kept the video feed active. For some reason, this time, it had turned off while I was settling her down, and the next time it turned on, the first frame of video was from my hand holding her binky in place. Knowing what it was helps, but I was running hot the rest of the night. I don't know if I've ever experienced that level of sheer terror in my life, and even to this day, knowing that nothing actually happened, I get a little freaked out by the memory. I used to work the graveyard shift at a Holiday Inn at a nearby town. For those of you that don't know, most small hotels will have the front desk receptionists do laundry overnight, so all bed sheets, towels etc. are ready for the housekeeping team the next morning. One night we had been at max capacity and we had piles and piles of laundry to wash, dry and fold. One of our plastic carts was filled with wet, dirty towels, so as you can imagine, the cart itself was heavy. As I was folding the clean laundry, I just see the laundry cart start rolling a few feet, almost as if someone was pushing the cart. Mind you, when these carts are full, they can be a little hard to push. They require strength to push even more so if the sheets towels have water. The cart kept rolling for a few seconds more and it just stopped. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed. I remember telling the housekeeper. I was in the subway once. A man walked in carrying a package of hot dogs. I watched him sit down and eat an entire package. After he was done, he then proceeded to drink the hot dog juice right out of the plastic package. It was 16 years ago. I still think about it. Reading this made me tense my whole body up with disgust. OMG, I'm sorry you had to see that. When I was 14, a guy followed me in a ravine and eventually started jerking off. I work as a dog walker. We had a client who was an extremely rich and well-known coin collector that lived alone with his dog and had a bit of an alcohol problem. Really nice guy, just smelled like booze and was very disheveled every morning when we'd pick his dog up to walk her. One Monday morning I walk into his huge house and it looks like he's asleep on the couch as he normally is, so I called his name to wake him up. I realized he's half on his couch and in a really weird position. He wasn't waking up, so eventually I walk over to him and his eyes are wide open, blood coming out of his nose and mouth, and his hands are turning black and blue. Threw up on his patio and called 911. They said he'd been dead since Friday. He lived there alone and didn't have friends or family nearby, so I was the one that found him. Really sad, as he was very nice and not very old. But yeah, still have an eye. This happened to my roommate, except we watched it happen. Nothing we could do. Operators had us do CPR on his dead body. My cousin was driving down the road while I sat in the front seat. I saw a bike about to crash towards us and gasped loudly, but next thing I knew there was no one. He asked what had happened and I told him I thought I saw a bike about to hit us. We arrive at the stop sign, on our left a biker pops up.